Hello, everyone, and thank you for everyone for joining us this evening for week 3 of the RISE Institute in Rugby Research and Injury Prevention Group Sports 2026 Sports Science Series. Our first intern that will be presenting today is Siddhant Parachuri. Siddhant will be presenting on heat therapy. Siddhant, would you please share your screen with us?
Thank you for the introduction. All right. Good evening, everybody. My name is Siddhant Parachuri, and I'm a Lindbrook Rising Senior. Today, I'll be presenting on heat therapy. Now, I'll focus on three mechanisms during this presentation: blood volume expansion, cardiovascular offloading, and musculoskeletal recovery. Before discussing these mechanisms, it's important to define what exactly we mean by heat therapy. So there are various methods of heat therapy, four being traditional sauna, hot water immersion, infrared sauna, and heat chambers. A traditional sauna uses dry heat, usually 80 to 100 degrees Celsius in heat, while hot water immersion immerses the athlete in 38 to 40 degrees Celsius water for 10 to 20 minutes. All of these methods differ in the way they deliver heat to the body, but they all affect the same physiological systems: the thermoregulatory system and the cardiovascular system. Now, the literature generally groups these effects into three major categories. The first being blood volume expansion, which affects oxygen delivery and thermoregulation. The second being cardiovascular offloading, which may help the body recover from the cardiovascular stress of exercise. And the third is musculoskeletal recovery, which focuses on muscles, connective tissue, and cellular repair processes. Each mechanism operates differently and has a different level of scientific support. And of these three pathways, blood volume expansion has some of the strongest evidence supporting it. So I'll begin there. Repeated heat exposure causes physiological responses that increase plasma volume, which is the liquid portion of your blood. As plasma volume increases, the heart can pump more blood with each beat. This increases the stroke volume and improves the oxygen delivery to working muscles. Additional blood volume also improves thermoregulation because athletes have a larger fluid reserve available for sweating. Some researchers compare these adaptations to certain benefits with altitude training. However, the mechanisms between altitude training and heat therapy are different. Understanding the mechanism is useful, but the more important question is whether these physiological changes produce a measurable outcome. One of the most frequently cited studies in heat therapy was conducted by Schoon and his colleagues in 2007. Competitive distance runners completed approximately 3 weeks of post-exercise sauna bathing. The researchers observed about a 7.1% increase in plasma volume, and about a 3.5% increase in red cell volume. What's important is that the researchers found that every participant improved performance. The physiological changes we discussed on the previous slide were accompanied by measurable athletic improvements. While blood volume expansion develops over repeated heat exposures, not all recovery benefits require weeks of adaptation. Some may occur much more rapidly through changes in cardiovascular function. The second mechanism is cardiovascular offloading. Recovery does not begin only when exercise ends. Following intense exercise, the cardiovascular system remains under stress as it works to restore normal conditions. Heat exposure causes vasodilation, meaning blood vessels widen. This reduces resistance within the circulatory system and may temporarily decrease workload on the heart. Researchers have also suggested that increased circulation may assist with the removal of metabolic byproducts generated during exercise, like lactic acid. This is where the evidence becomes more nuanced. Unlike blood volume expansion, these cardiovascular effects appear to be highly dependent on how heat is applied. A major conclusion from the literature is that heat is not automatically beneficial. Several studies reported positive effects, while others reported little to no benefit. The difference often becomes difference in results often comes down to timing, temperature, and training, and the design of the training session that preceded the heat exposure. For example, hot water immersion around 38 to 40 degrees Celsius appears effective in many studies. However, applying heat immediately after a demanding workout may actually prolong physiological stress after a workout, then reduce it. The practical implication for athletes is that protocol matters more than heat exposure alone, as well as timing. The first two mechanisms primarily involve the cardiovascular system, but the final mechanism shifts our attention towards the tissues athletes are often trying to recover most directly: muscles, tendons, and connective tissue. The third mechanism involves musculoskeletal recovery. Heat increases blood flow to muscles and connective tissues, which may help deliver oxygen and nutrients while removing waste. Heat exposure may also temporarily reduce stiffness and improve tissue flexibility. Researchers are particularly interested in heat shock proteins, which help collect cells and assist with repairing damaged proteins after physiological stress. While these mechanisms are biologically plausible, meaning they're explained by scientific evidence, direct evidence in athletic populations remains more limited than the evidence supporting blood volume expansion. At this point, we've discussed all three purpose mechanisms, but they aren't supported equally by literature. Comparing the strength of the evidence helps put these findings into perspective. When comparing the evidence, blood volume expansion currently has the strongest support. Cardiovascular offloading has moderate support, but outcomes depend heavily on the specific protocol being used. Musculoskeletal recovery remains the least established mechanism, despite several promising biological explanations. It's also worth noting that many studies involve relatively small sample sizes and limited athlete populations. As a result, researchers still cannot make definitive recommendations regarding the optimal use of heat therapy. That comparison leads directly to the overall takeaway from the current research. In conclusion, heat therapy appears to influence multiple physiological systems involved in athletic recovery. The strongest evidence supports blood volume expansion, which may improve endurance, performance, and thermoregulation. Cardiovascular offloading shows promise, but depends heavily on timing, temperature, and protocol design, making it really hard to pull off. Musculoskeletal recovery remains biologically supported, but additional research is needed before stronger conclusions can be made and we can confirm that actually works. Rather than asking whether heat therapy works, the more useful question may be when, how, and for whom it works best. There are my references, and thank you.
Thank you, Sadan, for an excellent presentation. Does anyone have any questions for him? Dr. Lopez, do you have anything to add?
No, it's kind of interesting. Thank you, Siddhant. Good topic. Can you go back a couple slides? Go back to 3 slides before. Keep going back one. Yeah. So, musculoskeletal recovery. I think the heat shock proteins, even though they're showing that those may be a great point to, to try to pinpoint where they could, I guess, affect the most. It's still quite up in the air how it really functions, whether it's, conduction of heat, Obviously you could see, right? Even if you look at the body to the image there, if it's the body's, releasing heat off the body, there's a certain amount of, recovery there. Not necessarily musculoskeletal, but blood flow being cooled. I mean, it's just interesting. It's a challenging topic, an area to look at. Did they say, or did you see in any of the literature, how, or obviously with the blood volume expansion, obviously, giving them IV fluids, cooling them down. But did you see how they applied this in any sport or maybe military
I
training capacity?
I don't think I saw how they applied heat shock proteins. I think they more mentioned it. I I think I skimmed through most of these the articles that I mentioned in my references, so I didn't get the full detail of a little bit of them. But I'm pretty sure they only mentioned heat shock proteins. They didn't really go into detail.
Yeah, I think the heat shock proteins, as you see on the right side there, they have more of a protective capacity, everyone, than actually a recovery. Um, if you get what I mean, it's hard to quantify the recovery per se. You get greater tissue flexibility, or reduced stiffness, or increased blood flow, but um, that's all to protect the tissue or tissue failure, lack of flow, things of that nature. Um, anyway, okay, great, thank you.
Our second intern that will be presenting today is Jack Kania. Jack will be presenting on electrolyte drink powders. Jack, would you please share your screen with us?
Thank you for the introduction, Brendan. My name is Jack Kania. I'm a rising freshman at University of Connecticut, and today I will be presenting on the article Factors Influencing the Restoration of Fluid and Electrolyte Balance After Exercise in the Heat. And this article was published by R.J. Mahin and his collaborators and colleagues, and it was published to the British Journal of Sports Medicine in 1997. So, all right, so just some definitions to get started with. Hydration, I'm pretty sure is a term that you're all familiar with, is the maintenance of normal body water levels. And so therefore dehydration is the loss of body water when sweating exceeds fluid intake. Electrolytes are electrically charged minerals that are essential for bodily functions and keep the body alive. So they aid in hydration, keeping a steady heartbeat, transmitting nerve signals, muscle contractions. So they're really important in everyday bodily functions. And some very common electrolytes are sodium, potassium, and magnesium, which are very vital for our survival. Euhydration is normal bodily hydration. Hypohydration is a deficit of water in the body, and hyperhydration is excess water within the body. So just some background knowledge about exercise in the heat. So when you exercise in the heat, muscles generate natural metabolic heat, and so naturally your body will sweat to cool that off. And so when you sweat, water and electrolytes are removed from your body. And unlike Sidon's presentation, where he could actually be really useful, and here when you're exercising, it could actually cause a lot of complications with your health potentially. So this removal of water and electrolytes can result in reduced plasma volume, and plasma is just the liquid within the blood that comprises about half of the human blood in the body. So the removal of water and electrolytes can reduce plasma volume. It can also lead to cardiovascular strain. Exercising, your heart being forced to pump blood for cooling while exercising in the heat definitely causes some more struggle while exercising, and decreased endurance. If you ever notice, like running in the heat is a lot harder than like running when it's not extremely hot. So it's a lot harder to keep that intensity for a long period of time. And then also increased risk of heat illness, such as heat cramps, exhaustion, heat strokes, are definitely possibilities that could happen with this removal of water and electrolytes when exercising in the heat. So naturally, some physiology about hydration. When you sweat, you release a lot of that bodily fluid, like we saw through sweating. And so when you drink only water, the concentrations of your body fluid falls and it becomes diluted. And then when you go to the bathroom and you excrete that water, you have insufficient body fluid yet once again because the water basically just went through your whole body. So this is why it's really important to also intake electrolytes for hydration, so that when you sweat, you lose your bodily fluids, you lose water and also electrolytes, especially sodium, and your plasma volume decreases, as we said. And what this does is it activates hormones such as ADH and aldosterone, which trigger thirst. And so to supplement for all that lost bodily fluid, taking water with also some electrolytes, especially sodium is the biggest one, will restore that balance once again and allow better water retention, and better hydration. All right, so the purpose of the article, the researchers in this article wanted to determine a lot of things, and they tested a lot of different things. But their main focus was the most effective way for athletes to rehydrate and retain water. They also tested the effects of sodium on fluid retention, the effects of potassium on fluid retention, the effects of drink volume on hydration, so how much you drink, the effects of food on rehydration, the effects of alcohol on rehydration, the effects of the menstrual cycle on hydration and sweat loss, the effects of hydration on exercise performance, and the effects of drink palatability, which is basically how much you like the drink and the taste of it on hydration. So the methods that they use in their studies, the subjects participate in intermittent exercise in 34 degrees Celsius temperature, which is around 93 degrees Fahrenheit, and 60 to 80% humidity. The participants exercised until around 2% of their body mass was lost through sweat, which in a 70 kilogram or 154-pound person is around 1.4 liters of sweat. So they lost a lot of sweat during this exercise and a lot of bodily fluid. And then after exercise, the subjects all consume fluids with varying compositions. So subjects consume different amounts of drink volumes. They consumed beverages of varying palatability, which is once again how much they enjoyed the beverage. Beverages also contain different amounts of sodium, potassium, and alcohol. And some subjects, on top of the beverage, also consume food. All right, so the effects of sodium on hydration. Higher sodium concentrations decrease urine output, which increases water retention. So this is clear in this graph right here. You can see as the sodium output increases, the cumulative urine output continues to decrease, and due to decreasing urine output, water retention, that implies that your body is retaining more water. And then additionally, higher sodium concentrations increase sodium balance within the body, so up to a point. So you can see here that in this graph, as the sodium concentrations increase, the sodium balance also begins to increase until you get to a point here at 100 millimoles per liter. You have an excess amount of sodium, so they found a sweet spot right here at around 52. But in general, higher sodium concentrations will also increase the sodium balance within the body. So some conclusions that the research drew about sodium effects on hydration is that sodium maintains plasma osmolality, which means that plasma and liquid particles are not really exiting the body and the particles aren't dissolving. Sodium also stimulates thirst, like we saw through those hormones. And sodium also drastically helps with water retention. It uses extracellular hydration mainly in the bloodstream and tissues to retain water. Potassium's role in rehydration. Potassium is different from sodium in that it hydrates intracellularly as opposed to extracellularly. Potassium ensures that cells are hydrated and functioning properly from inside the cell. And it also helps to improve fluid retention compared to plain water, but not as much as sodium. You can see here in this graph the potassium is K, and potassium does increase the net fluid make the net fluid balance closer to zero, but it's not a drastic increase, which is why the researchers here recommended combining potassium with sodium in a solution to help increase water retention and hydration even more. Okay, so some drink volume and palatability's effects on hydration. the researchers recommended or found that replacing exactly the fluid that was lost will not suffice, and is not enough. Due to urine loss after exercise, resulting in greater fluid leaving and exiting the body and leaving the body than entering. So the researchers recommended that 150 to 200% of the fluid that was lost during exercise is drinking again post exercise, and that's optimal for rehydration. So, example, if you lost a liter of sweat during exercise, at least 1.5 liters of water, sodium, or whatever beverage should be drinking again. And then palatability, which is again just how much you like to drink. Increased likeness of beverages resulted in greater consumption, obviously, because they liked it more, and also resulted in increased hydration because they drank more of it. And then along with, as you can see down here, if drinks like a sports drink or this lemonade contain more electrolytes, that's providing more water retention and more hydration to the participants. So the researchers also tested the menstrual cycle on hydration. So they tested it on women at different points in their menstrual cycle, and they ended up. So you can see here 2 days before onset of menses, which is just the first day of a woman's period, and then 5 days after, and then 19 days after. So at different points within the menstrual cycle, and they ended up finding that no significant differences of volume of urine were produced, and therefore there were no significant differences in water retention and hydration among the participants. So the menstrual cycle doesn't really have an effect on hydration. They also tested food on hydration. They had another group of participants that had not only water and electrolyte drink, but also a meal post-exercise. The meal, and if the meal contains electrolytes, particularly sodium and potassium, then it was also found to help lower urine output and result in better fluid retention. So this is kind of conditional. It depends on what food you eat, but food could also help with fluid retention and hydration post-exercise. They also tested alcohol and hydration. So the participants drank different alcohol percentages within their beverage after exercise, and they found that increased alcohol consumption actually led to increased urine production. So the opposite of the electrolytes that we saw. But it wasn't really significant, but nonetheless, still as the alcohol percentage increased, the fluid retained and the fluid retention decreased. They also tested the hydration effects on performance. So the subsequent performance, athletes consume various drinks after their exercise to see how they would perform in the future. So some athletes consumed water, some consumed a placebo drink that they thought was maybe had electrolytes or something like that in it, but it was really just water. And then others consumed a carbohydrate electrolyte drink. And they found that they exercised again a couple days after, I believe, a couple days after their first time exercising and after they recovered and drank these drinks. And they found that the best performance occurred after a carbohydrate electrolyte beverage, which is like sugar plus sodium or potassium, something of that sort. So this shows that not only does proper rehydration improve recovery and hydration after exercise, but also improves future exercise performance, and exercising in subsequent times. So some key takeaways and conclusions. Electrolytes are essential for effective hydration. The most important electrolyte is sodium for fluid retention. Definitely, if you can drink sodium, or if you could have sodium with your water, that would help with water retention and with hydration the most. Potassium can also improve fluid retention as well, but isn't as necessary as sodium. Definitely doesn't hurt. Definitely still helps. So if you could combine it with sodium, that works. And then 150% more fluid should be consumed than what was lost during exercise. Food and sports drinks can also contribute to water retention when they contain electrolytes, and proper hydration improves athletic performance. Not only from recovering from the past athletic performance, but also in the future. So some limitations of this article: it was a small sample size. They didn't have too many participants. It was also small. I feel like it was a small snapshot of a very large, population overall of who they're trying to gauge the results to. The participants, apart from the test about the menstrual cycle, participants were mainly male, young, and healthy. They were all athletes, so it definitely took a small snapshot of a lot of people, and it's maybe not very applicable to people who aren't very young or male or in good athletic shape. Exercise was also performed under controlled conditions. They controlled heat and controlled humidity, but there's still other weather conditions such as maybe rain or wind. Also, different access to fluids and restricted access to fluids that people might experience in their everyday life, or just real world competitiveness. Like if you're competing in some sort of athletic competition, such as a meet, a game, a match, something like that, and you're experiencing that intensity of that match or whatever it is. They didn't take that into account during this research. Additionally, genetically, people sweat at different amounts, so this might additionally also not be applicable to the whole general population, like within the world. Um, and in the future, it might be better if there's another process of research that took place, and other tests that took place. It might be better to individually assess how this water retention and hydration works with these different beverages and different conditions, based off the person's individual how they individually sweat and lose sweat while exercising. So here's my reference. This is the article that I use, and I'll take any questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack, for an excellent presentation. Does anyone have any questions? Or does Dr. Lopez have anything to add?
Yeah, why don't we get a presentation mode? All right, great. A great job there, Jack. The issue comes down is that when they did the athletes, obviously they did probably Gatorade, right? It's a carbohydrate drink with sodium and potassium. But they didn't do something like brine, like pickle juice, right? They didn't test any of that. How old is this paper?
It's from 1997.
Yeah. Maybe a little outdated in some of that. All right, right? Because now, right, you've seen at the events and all that, we have pickle juice and concentration. Now, obviously, the brine that they make you drink, right, is to consume sodium concentrated, but in a small dosing, right? That's why they're little bottles, right? They're not large bottles per se. They're small bottles. That's one. Well, also because it's it's irritant to the stomach lining, so they make you drink that. So this way you could drink it, but you get that blast of sodium, and supposedly in 30 minutes you're supposed to feel better. Now, obviously, that doesn't mean you do not want to drink, or it's not going to make you even thirstier. The whole idea is that if you're not drinking like a a gallon of Gatorade, but you still have to compete, you'd probably take half a shot of the brine, then probably a Gatorade or a half a Gatorade to just consume some fluids. It's a balance, right? It depends on how you feel. I remember, like, whatever you want to call him, the quarterback, whatever, our fly half would, he'd try to drink or consume as much as he could because he always, regurgitated before the match. There are different people, how they deal with stress, how performance stress and anxiety and things like that. We didn't even start getting into the jockeys yet. That's a whole nother world. You know that, right? The jockeys like have the worst teeth
Yeah.
because the amount of vomiting that they do to get to the weight, to get as light as possible on the back of the horse. They have a dentist like on staff there at the at Belmont racetrack, at the racetracks, just for the jockeys. Pretty wild. So whether you do it to perform as a jockey, or you do it because of anxiety, you also have to take into consideration how your electrolytes are before practice or training. Excuse me. What I'm trying to say is it's a balance of your physiology. You have to know how you're going to perform under a circumstance, and you have to know how you're going to replenish that. That's really kind of what it comes down to. And whether you're excuse me, um as Sidhant probably should have followed this. This could have been following a presentation after you, Jack, you presenting these ideas, evaluating what how they tested, what they tested, and then obviously attempting to intervene with whether you blood volume expansion, whether or not you're going to give them hydration or IV fluids, or somehow try to intervene in these athletes. The conversation we had earlier with Dr. Lawrence Armstrong was very enlightening about all this. And, he wants us to get, more into it to try to understand what's going on with the athletes themselves. All right. On that, I wanted to ask, they also did it, like you said, in a small cohort of healthy, young, athletic males, right? Yeah, those will be more, could be susceptible. But how about, your workers, everyone's out there working in the sun, let alone, where was the study done? What state?
I don't think it just said it was published to a British journal. It didn't like specify where it was done.
Yeah, man. So obviously, differences in the South, right? We have extreme temperature changes between New York and Florida, right? There's no science to that. It just is, right? And let alone if you're in the state of Texas in the summer and they have these races, these bicycle races in 110 degrees. You know, you know, I think you're just asking for trouble. You're gonna have these conditions that are going to be so violent to the body. Um, you're making them expend themselves. You're making them, exert themselves internally, getting a temperature, and then, attempting for them to try to hydrate at stations, attempting for them to try to, supplement with stations. I think that's, it's just impractical. All right, like I said, but the big thing is the workers. Excuse me, the workers will be a problem in regards to, those are the ones that are going to be probably presenting in the ER. And those are the ones going to be presenting. You can control probably in athleticism, but you won't be able to control in real life, right? You don't, that construction worker who drank the 4 glasses of coffee and then drink another cup of coffee for lunch and then continue to work in the sun. That's the one you're going to have to deal with. That's the one that most likely you're going to have to, you're going to have to give them 2 IVs. You're just going to have to, really supplement them in some capacity. All right. All right, great. Anything else?
That will conclude week 3 of the RISE Institute and Rugby Research and Injury Prevention Group Sports Science Series. Thank you all for attending.